In Dutch we have two different past tenses, the OVT and the VTT. The OVT is used a little less than the VTT, but that doesn't mean it's any less important. In this video I'd like to look at how to construct the OVT. The OVT is very similar to the English past simple. In English, you, for example, take the word to work and you add ed to the end of it to get worked. I worked. That means it's in the past tense. In Dutch, we do something very similar and it's also very simple, just like that. You take the ik form of a verb and add te to the end of it. Let's take to work. Werken. The ik form is ik werk. You take werk and add te to the end of it. Ik werkte. That means I worked. So there you go. That's the OVT in Dutch. Let's take another verb. For example, knippen, which means to cut with scissors, not with a knife. Now, if I want to say I cut in the present tense, then I have to say ik knip. So we take this knip and add te to the end of it to obtain ik knipte. And that's your past tense in the OVT. This stays the same for all persons. So for example, ik knipte, jij knipte, hij knipte, or zij knipte. It's all the same, knipte. Except in the plural, when you have to add an n to the end. For example, wij knipten, jullie knipten, or zij knipten. That's not very hard, it's just one extra letter, and it's always the same one. Unfortunately, that's a little too simple. No, we need to complicate things a little bit. Some words actually don't get te, but they get de instead. For example, rennen, to run. That becomes ik ren, and then we add de to the end of it to get the OVT. Ik rende, I ran in the past. Now, why do we get de here? There's a good reason for it. It has to do with the voice, but I'm not going to explain all of that. Instead, I'm going to teach you a little trick which will help you remember whether to use te or de. What's important is to look at the letter before the en in the infinitive. For example, werken, the letter before en is a k. Rennen, the letter before the en is an n. Now, some letters get te and some letters get de. The letters that get te are p, t, k, f, s, and ch, which we pronounce as h in Dutch. So these are the letters that get te. All other letters get de. Now, there is an easy way to remember these 6 different sounds, and that's the words soft ketchup. Soft ketchup contains all of the letters that get te. Look at the words, soft ketchup. It's got S, F, T, K, another T, CH, and P. And these are actually all of the letters that get te. All of the other letters and all of the vowels get de. So now that you know all of this, let's do a little exercise. Let's put these sentences in the OVT. The first one. Ik luister naar de radio. Ik luister naar de radio. Well, let's see. Luisteren. The ik form is ik luister. This ends in an R. R. So, the R is not in the word soft ketchup. So we get de. Ik luisterde. Ik luisterde naar de radio. I listened to the radio. Another one. Hij poetst zijn auto. Hij poetst zijn auto. That means he is cleaning his car. How would you put this in the OVT? Well, let's see. Poetsen, the ik form is ik poets. Poets ends in s an S. The S is in the word soft ketchup, so we need to add TE. Hij poetste zijn auto. He cleaned his car in the past. Another one. Ze print een document. Ze print een document. She is printing a document. In the past, in the OVT, that would be ze printte een document. Ze printte een document. Why? Because printen in the ik form is ik print. That ends in a T, so you need to add TE, because T is in soft ketchup. Now, look at the double T in this word. Ik print already ends in a T, so if you add another TE, you get two T's. It makes a lot of sense. Let's do one more. Ze bouwen een huis. Ze bouwen een huis. They're building a house. In the past, in the OVT, that would be ze bouwden een huis. Now, why is that? Let's look at bouwen. The ik form is ik bouw. It ends in a W. The W is not one of the consonants in soft ketchup, so we have to add DE. But this is in plural, so we also need an extra N at the end of it. Ze bouwden een huis. Now, there are two slightly tricky situations, and it only relates to spelling. It has nothing to do with pronunciation. But in order to get the spelling right, you need to know this little exception. This concerns the words leven and reizen, and all other words that have a V or a Z before the EN. Now, what would you normally do? You look at reizen and you take the ik form. That becomes ik reis. Notice that this ends in an S. In the infinitive, we saw reizen with a Z. What is it then? Because soft ketchup tells you that you need to use TE after an S, but DE after a Z. Well, if you remember our rule, you always need to look at the letters before the EN, and that is a Z. So, in the case of reizen, we need to use DE and not TE. So it's consistent with our rule, it's just something to remember. So it becomes ik reisde with SDE. The same goes for leven. The V is not in soft ketchup, so you need to use DE. The ik form is ik leef. Put DE at the end of that and you get ik leefde with FDE. Let's see if you understood that. Let's take the word geloven, to believe. How would you say, I believed you in the past? So, I believed you. The answer is, ik geloofde jou. Ik geloofde jou. Or ik geloofde je. That's also fine. Why geloofde? Well, geloven has a V before the EN, so we need to use DE. The ik form is ik geloof. So add DE to the end and you get ik geloofde. Now, I've got some bad news for you, because the rules that we just saw only apply to regular verbs, and a lot of the words that we use on an everyday basis are irregular, and so they don't even get TE or DE sometimes, or the vowels change. Take, for example, the word zijn. In the OVT, that becomes was, ik was. Or hebben becomes ik had. It doesn't have DE or TE, and the vowels change, or in the case of zijn, the entire word changes. And unfortunately, that's just something that you'll need to study. But I've got something to help you. I'll post a link in a description below to a set of flashcards that you can print. That's them. That's how they look when they come out of the printer. And you can cut them out, and they have the verb on one side, so the infinitive, the infinitive, and then they have the past tense in the OVT on the back. So you can study, for example, liggen, lag, and lagen. There's all kinds of things that you can do with these little flashcards. First of all, you can drill yourself. You can show yourself the infinitive and then try to guess or try to remember the OVT. If you get it right, you put the card on your right side, and if you get it wrong, you put the card on your left side. Now at the end, you take all of the cards that you got wrong and you go through them again until you've got no cards left and you've remembered them all. And you can do this, twice a week, 3 times a week until you know them all. Another thing you can do is put them all on the table with the infinitive showing. And then you can take a random one and try to make a sentence with it in the OVT. So for example, I take lezen and I can say ik las een boek. And then you can check if you got it right. And I was, because the past tense, the OVT is las. A third thing you can do is put them all out in front of you on the table with the infinitive showing, and then you take 2 or 3 cards at once and you try to make a little story out of them. Here I've got liggen and lezen, so I can make a little story like ik lag in bed en las een boek. I was lying in bed and I was reading a book. Now I'll make a separate video on how to use the other past tense, the VTT, like for example, ik heb gewerkt. And I'll also make a separate video on how to contrast the 2 tenses and how to know which one to use in which situation. So I really hope you liked this video. If you want to support me to help me make more content in the future, or to help me buy new equipment, pay for my software that I use, or just to thank me for the work that goes into this video, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is on screen and in the description below. For this video, I would really like to thank Michael, Luis, Caterina, and Fabio for their support for this video. I appreciate it very much, guys. Thanks for your support.